Welcome and thank you for joining today's webinar, the 2019 Make or Break CIO Priority List. I'm Kirby Orozco and I'll be your moderator today. Before we start, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. All participants will be placed on mute during the presentation. Please submit any questions you may have in the Q&A panel. We will answer them during our Q&A session at the end of the presentation. This session will be recorded and we will email you a link to the recording version after the event. Presenting today is Kevin Hansel, who is the CIO at SailPoint. Kevin has more than 20 years experience in building and growing IT at high-growth startups and early-stage technology companies through to successful acquisition or IPO, including Convex Computers to HP, Power Computing to Apple, Applied Science Fiction to Kodak, and Wayport to AT&T. Kevin joined SailPoint 2.5 years ago to take on the challenge of scaling and maturing the company's IT capabilities ahead of becoming a public company. During that time, some of the key areas he tackled included business enablement, strategic alignment, cost and profit improvement, increasing IT's speed and agility, security, compliance, and risk management. Today he's going to outline 10 key priorities that he thinks are among the most important for a CIO to be thinking about in 2019. And with that, I'll hand it over to Kevin.
Thank you, Kirby. I appreciate everybody for taking the time out of their busy schedules today to tune in, and I hope that you find some of what I'll be covering today to be helpful. I'd like to kind of start off with setting the stage for operating IT in the business today. So Gartner's 2018 CIO agenda now shows growth and market share has become the #1 business objective, moving digital transformation down to #2, followed by profit improvement and innovation. So this is an interesting change because it seems to indicate that companies are beginning to make progress in their transformations and that businesses are now looking to leverage those transformations for additional growth and market share. Of course, I think everybody knows that security incidents continue to increase in volume, level of sophistication, and the types of data targeted. Hacking has become a highly profitable multi-billion-dollar industry at this point and continues to be one of, if not the biggest things keeping CIOs up at night, me included. CIOs continue to be challenged from all angles, and the business at the same time is expecting more from them as a business enabler in this new cloud era as opposed to just a technology provider. And that if a business sees the need for a CIO at all. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So there's probably 100 things on a CIO's plate to think about. And today I'm going to be outlining 10 things that kind of bubble up in my mind that CIOs should be considering prioritizing for 2019. This certainly isn't a definitive list, and I'm sure everybody has their own set, but I think these are things that are important for me, and I'd love to share them with you. So first up is changing the perception of IT. So over the past 2 decades or so, especially going back to the days where almost everything was on-prem data centers, servers, apps, etc., IT developed a reputation of being inefficient, expensive, and slow to deliver. And this was completely contrary to the agile business enabler that IT always wanted to be. Many businesses, and especially newer and emerging ones, have fully embraced the cloud and really are bypassing or de-emphasizing IT in order to acquire the tools and applications they need without slowing the business down. So we've got Agile, DevOps, continuous integration, continuous deployment. All of these things are become primary operational models for many companies, again, especially early stage, that may have adopted all of these things almost to 100%. So they have no on-prem, they're not doing anything in legacy form. And many times those orgs are actually outside of the IT organization. So the interesting thing is we're seeing many of these companies have moved away from IT to take advantage of all of the cloud directly available solutions, and especially SaaS, are now finding that they've lost some of that strategic business alignment and process discipline that IT has always provided in the past. And so this can result in an unwieldy technology and security environment that can ironically impede the growth of a business once it kind of reaches critical mass. So all of the speed means businesses can move more quickly than ever, but it also means that businesses can get into trouble more quickly than ever. And so with all this change, I think CIOs today must focus on adding value by ensuring all of this new acceleration of technology acquisition and delivery is still done in a strategic way that's business aligned, secure, and has process discipline necessary for it to all scale. The pendulum kind of needs to swing back a little bit the other way, and a CIO really can help add value in that. So the cloud, DevOps, Agile movement has been transformational, but CIOs should really embrace that and help accelerate that even faster. And so I think the bottom line is CIOs still must add values in the same areas they always have, but in a slightly different way. So when we talk about business enablement, strategic alignment, cost and process improvement, speed and agility, security, compliance, risk management, those are all the things that a CIO should still be focused on, but we need to do it in a different way, leveraging everything the Agile Cloud has to offer without creating undue friction that has always been associated with IT. Priority number 2 is I think we need to leverage IT even more to help out-innovate the competition. So accelerating business capability has always been something that's been a key responsibility of CIOs, and in 2019, that's just table stakes. I think CIOs need to be thinking about out-innovating their competitors really on 2 fronts. The first, obviously, is the traditional internal business enablement that they drive for a company. But contributing to the company's own products and services is another area where IT can get more involved. So technology is becoming more and more of a core component of products and services that all companies sell. This has always been the case for leading-edge technology companies, but when you think of traditional brick-and-mortar type companies, companies that manufacture hard goods, they typically did not have technology as a key component of their product and service. They used it to help deliver and manufacture it. But now with the innovation of smart devices, IoT, embedded Wi-Fi, and things like that, you're seeing a lot of traditional products become technology-enabled products. And so IT can really have never been in a better position to help out with this, and it's important that they kind of step up to that challenge. So a couple of examples is Tesla cars are really computers, a battery, and 5 wheels, right? Much of the same technology innovations that have been pioneered in the IT space over the last several decades have been incorporated directly into that product, right? So if you think about performance monitoring, featured upgrades over the air, security patches over the air, these are all things that IT has helped pioneer and refine in managing technology environments that have been pushed and directly impact a highly successful product on the market. Then also here, like at SailPoint, my IT organization does everything it can to help drive features and innovations into our own identity governance products. Number 3 is one of the biggest challenges I think companies are dealing with now, and I alluded to this a little bit earlier, and it's this concept of SaaS sprawl, right? So SaaS apps have fundamentally transformed the speed and agility in which businesses can move. And that fact combined with the reality that enterprise-level applications are now only a credit card or a PO number away from any business unit, that's caused the application acquisition to explode. And while a good thing, this has also come many times with unintended consequences and results. So companies have now started to realize that SaaS app sprawl can be too much of a good thing. Unabated growth, lack of visibility, centralized management and oversight, skyrocketing costs, duplicated or overlapping functionality, lack of alignment with business goals, Data proliferation has also been a huge challenge as data gets copied back and forth between numerous apps that are not integrated, so you lose your source of truth, you lose data hygiene as things move manually back and forth between this entire ecosystem. And then finally, exponentially increasing threat surfaces, right? When we think about access governance, API exposure, data leakage, vendor risk, anytime that you acquire an app, you take on more of that as part of your overall threat surface. But then when you stitch 3 or 4 apps together via API integrations, the risk doesn't necessarily scale linearly. Sometimes it scales exponentially to where you have a spider web of apps that now have each represent their own threat landscape that gets magnified by the fact that they're all now stitched together. And so CIOs really can step in to help get some alignment and containment around this and help drive strategy, integration, security, and governance back into the business. But what's really key is at the same time continuing to leverage speed and agility that SaaS can deliver. Priority number 4 is to develop and increase your staff skills. So as IT organizations grow, they're running up against an increasing shortage of IT talent with skills and new technologies such as, software-defined networking, machine learning, AI, microservices, hyperconvergence, IoT. All of these things are hot buzzwords right now. And it's not only hard enough to attract that talent, but we really, really have to focus on developing our talent so that those skills continue to grow within our company. These are really difficult to find because a lot of these disciplines didn't exist 10, even 5, maybe even 3 years ago. So IT needs to continually train and reskill, not only to help grow the business, but also continue to make the business more attractive as a place to work. So again, maintaining and a lot of times within a CIO's budget, training is one of the first things that get looked at when we come to haircutting budgets, during budget cycles. Something to really focus on is it's really key that our skill set continues to grow and we don't overlook this. Priority number 5 is basically the same thing, but looking internally at ourselves. And so even IT professionals who are in the business of managing technology are having a difficult time keeping up the pace of change in the industry. I get 20, 30, 40 emails a day introducing new products, new concepts, new technologies to the market. And so all of these cutting-edge technologies, even 2 and 3 years ago, are already old news, especially in some of the areas that I mentioned, machine learning, AI, microservices, DevOps, or should I say SRE right now. And so IT get bombarded with all of these new products on a daily basis. So sifting through it all, understanding what is real and what is hype, and deploying it all in a strategic way is very difficult. So more than ever, I think companies rely on their CIOs to help lead the way, but also remain highly informed and educated on what's going on in an ever-increasing, accelerating technology space. And so basically the bottom line is I think we all have the responsibility to our companies and to our teams to continually re-educate ourselves so that we can improve our knowledge. Priority 6 is dealing about that universal buzzword that we all hear about, digital transformation. So the idea of digital transformation means different things to different people. In many ways, the term kind of drives me a little bit crazy because it's so overused that it's almost meaningless. But somewhere in there, I think it does represent a real priority, and I prefer to think of it as representing acceleration of business capabilities and enablement of new ones. And that's not purely a technology statement. For older, well-established companies, digital transformation can mean replacing legacy systems and processes with modern, agile systems, and even new cultures. But for newer companies already fully digital, I think the term really defines a continuous journey forward, right? The goal is never achieved. Speed, resiliency, and security becomes ever more important. And so no matter what digital transformation means to you, I think the bottom line is that CIOs across all industries must continue to drive this true digital-first agenda in order to thrive. Priority number 7, the identity vector. And so security's been top of mind as CISOs and CIOs for many years now. It's finally getting serious inside of the rest of the executive suite and even the boardroom. And one of the interesting things and neat things that I'm particularly proud of is that in 2018, SailPoint established a new Board of Directors cybersecurity committee for itself to help oversee the company's security and risk management platform. This is something that the company identified as a priority. Being a security company ourselves, we felt like this was a critical step to take to drive high-level visibility into the board so that they would be informed, updated, educated, and help manage risk at the board level and help drive business initiatives back down into the company. So this is really important, but it's no longer sufficient to rely on firewall perimeters, endpoint security, and access management to maintain our security posture. The threat landscape's growing in all different directions, right? The types of data that is targeted, it used to be credit card numbers and bank account numbers, and now all forms of PII, medical information, even company intellectual property is being targeted by nation states. The sophistication of cyber criminals continue to increase as well, because one of the things that we kind of lose track of is all of the great technology innovations that the rest of the business world is using, that our cyber criminals have access to the exact same things. So when we talk about machine learning and cloud scale and artificial intelligence, that stuff works really, really well to enable additional attack vectors for the hackers to make it easier for them, more commoditized for them, and so it makes it more difficult for everybody. Nation states are also becoming more and more interested in private companies. And so all of these things are really kind of coming together to point out that we have a much more difficult landscape to deal with at the same time that we have an evaporating perimeter. And so the consequences of breaches are also extraordinarily more pervasive and more punitive than they've ever been, and I think this is only going to get worse over the next couple of years. So what do we do about this? Identity has increasingly become one of the most important and central elements of security and breach prevention. So deploying a litany of security tools and simply controlling user access and multi-factor authentication is no longer sufficient. Businesses need to really govern their identity in order to answer 3 key questions, right? I think fundamentally we need to understand who has access to what, who should have that access, and what they're doing with that access. While controlling user access to an environment or an application using an identity access management or SSO solution is clearly critical, that's only the first step. We absolutely need locks on the doors of every house we own, but that's not enough anymore. What about controlling and monitoring access when somebody's actually inside a house and using a single tool to manage that for an entire neighborhood? The only way to sufficiently manage that issue inside each business application that a business owns using a single platform is a true identity governance platform. We simply can't rely on all these other security tools to adequately address that threat vector. Priority number 8 is to partner with your CISO. Now, I know not all companies are fortunate enough to have a CIO and a CISO. Sometimes they're the same person. Sometimes the CISO reports to the CIO, and sometimes they don't. But in any case, there is this natural give and take between the CIO and the CISO that's complicated by a couple of conflicting priorities. CIOs are under pressure to drive business solutions faster than ever. They're all about operational efficiency, adding more capability at the company. CISOs are under pressure to maintain a strong security and risk management posture. And so, because security rarely makes anybody's job easier, by its nature, it often creates obstacles that increase user friction. That makes things more difficult for the CIO. And so, I want to review real quickly 6 elements that Darren Rolls, who is SailPoint's CTO, CISO, and I think about as we partner together in our respective roles. Darren has kind of identified 3 elements for success in his view, in his role as a CISO. So number 1 is to go light on the FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Users get weary of hearing all of the bad things that could happen, but they don't necessarily believe will truly happen to them. Crying wolf, playing chicken little, and it won't happen to me are all real issues if we overdo it. So think about how long it took to get drivers to wear seatbelts. They certainly understood the value of the seatbelt, but for a long time they never thought they would need it or would happen to them. Secondly is assume compromise. The reality for all companies is it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when you have a security event. I think everybody kind of needs to stand up and recognize that fact. And so assume that's the case and work to be as prepared as possible so that you have a well-designed security incident response plan in place, and make sure that that's a mandatory requirement for all businesses. One of the things we find is when companies are breached, when the dust settles and the damage is done, one of the key differentiators between how businesses are judged in arrears from a breach is how effectively they responded and communicated about the breach, right? Because at that point, everybody recognizes that security threats exist and are possible. But how a company responds, communicates, and overcomes that breach has everything to do with the company's reputation and credibility after the dust is settled. A lot of the companies that we think of when we think of major breaches that have occurred in the past are ones that did it extraordinarily poorly. The ones that did a great job of getting on top of it, clearly and transparently communicating to their stakeholders, the press, the analysts, etc., and then outline their clear strategy for overcoming and offering evidence that they have improved, tend to remain and keep credibility with existing customers and allowing them to attract new ones. So I can't really overestimate the importance of preparing for an issue by having a strong incident response plan and process in place. The third thing that Darren likes to point out is that complexity is the enemy of security. If your security team has 20 different panes of glass to look at, how can you run an efficient security operations center that way? Too many tools and not enough focus on the core basics of security doesn't increase your security posture, and in fact, it can actually have the opposite effect. On my side is the CIO is a little more responsible for operations and business enablement. I think about it in three different vectors as well. The first thing is try to find the right risk balance. As I mentioned before, security rarely makes anybody's job easier. The conversation really needs to move away from security and toward risk management. Businesses really should take a risk-managed approach to everything that they do. Protect things at a level that is truly appropriate for the kind of data you're processing. If it's public data, you're probably not going to spend nearly as much time and resources worrying about protecting that at the same level that you might with sensitive PII. This allows you to focus your resources where they're needed and where they should be while helping to better balance the needs of security with the needs of the business. The second thing is to become a security champion and help build in security from the beginning. Right? CIOs really need to prioritize security right alongside their other priorities, time to market, features, availability. Security should never be an afterthought. and IT should really be the CISO's greatest ally. And then the last thing is to use innovation and creativity, reduce user friction. So when we're deploying security solutions, it's always easy to take a real black and white approach of, hey, this is allowed and this is not. These are the rules of the road, deal with it. However, to add the most value, CIOs should be as creative and innovative as possible to accomplish the goal, but reduce the friction as much as possible, right? Let's put the burden on ourselves to go figure out and solve the solution, solve the problem in a sophisticated way that is just transparent to the users, and not put the burden on them of having to deal with simple black and white security. And so there are multiple ways to solve every problem. Find the one that's easiest on the user that still accomplishes the goal. Priority number 9 is all about compliance. And so no matter what your business you're in today, compliance with various industry standards is becoming more and more of a requirement for you to do business anywhere in the world. If you accept credit cards, even if you completely outsource that, for example, you still must be PCI compliant. If you sell a cloud service, more and more customers are looking at things like SOC 2 and ISO 27001 as evidence of your security, privacy, and service assurance. GDPR is a law. It's not a regulation. It's not an option, but it's actually a law that every company must deal with. You do any kind of business whatsoever with any kind of a European resident. And then finally, FedRAMP, HITRUST, and other highly specific industry standards are being increasingly required to close deals in various markets. So this compliance gobbledygook space, it seems like we get a new acronym every week. Even in the United States, various states are looking at developing additional compliance standards. It's critical that we remain abreast of these. A lot of them may apply to us, some of them absolutely apply to us, but we need to keep our eye on the ball at what things might be coming our way. And so when I think about compliance, SailPoint has quite a few compliance standards itself, so we've gone through this. One of the things I'd offer up is when we think about compliance, scoping is really critical to managing costs. Spend as much time as possible up front scoping only what is truly applicable, so that you don't end up spending money certifying environments that are not required. Avoid the temptation of taking the check-the-box approach. Right? There's a big difference between security and compliance, and too many companies try to equate them and achieve one, hoping that they've accomplished the other. But taking the check-the-box approach with compliance might be the easy way out, but it doesn't make you more secure, and in fact could make you less secure. As an example, a compliance control standard will say, have a process for password complexity at your company. As long as you have one, they have very little to say about how good or bad that is. It's really kind of up to you on how complex you want to make your password policy. But as a CIO, you should be thinking about it, look, I'm much more interested in keeping my environment secure. I'm going to put in a policy that enforces strong password and can assure that we're reducing the risk internally that, oh, by the way, also happens to check a compliance box. Leveraging compliance as a vehicle to help drive discipline and security deeper into the business is a great thing, right? A lot of times you can use compliance as kind of like that stick to convince the business that certain things have to be put in place. However, don't depend on compliance solely as a source of making you secure. And then ensuring that you're factoring good security practices as part of your control standards so that you not only end up with compliance, but secure compliance. Priority number 10, and the final one, is something that's been a CIO priority for years and for a good reason, and that's business alignment. So every technology investment a company makes really needs to have a direct path to a strategic business goal. I think IT organizations, companies fall victim too often into falling in love with great new technology solutions, things that would improve an operational function that are really, really cool, but if they don't align to a business objective, the CIO really needs to look hard at that. With the proliferation of all these newer, more nimble technologies along with everything as a service, it's easy to veer off course from a core architectural roadmap that's fundamentally aligned with the business. And so it's never been easier to solve for things in a vacuum, but drive the discipline and develop a process that prevents this. This kind of goes back to the SaaS Sprawl argument. Too many things have been solved in a vacuum to develop that SaaS Sprawl. And this kind of goes back to the CIO being in a position to help drive some discipline and strategic direction around that. Solving tactical pain points or implementing technologies for technology's sake is an easier trap to fall into. So CIOs need to continually work with other leaders in the company to ensure that business alignment remains a key driver for everything we do. And so I know it's a quick list. I covered it very quickly, but those are the top 10 things that bubble up in my mind as things to think about for this year. There's a lot of other things to choose from, and different priorities make sense for different environments. But my hope is that you got some kind of value or maybe some idea, triggered some thought that maybe helps you go back into your business and add to your priority list. And so thanks for all for listening, and with that, I'll turn it back over to Kirby for Q&A.
Thank you, Kevin. What a wonderful, insightful presentation. I'd now like to start our Q&A session. And as a reminder, you may submit your questions at any time into the Q&A panel. Let's just go ahead and kick it off. Here's an interesting one. Why is identity such a high priority item?
So I talked about this just a little bit during the slide, but I think the security industry has a big problem. There's too many products on the market. Things are becoming too complex, and companies are losing focus on the small number of core vectors that are actually used in about 90% plus of all breaches. So I was just out at RSA last week, and I think that that conference only kind of confirmed this. Literally, the minute a new threat vector is discovered, you see 4 new products appear on the market, right? There's a lot of private equity, there's a lot of venture capital that are looking to capitalize on this high-growth security market that's getting more and more mind share in every board and every stockholder across the globe. But what we're finding is all of this added complexity is creating a lot of defocusing in the industry. And companies are losing focus on the core basics that actually fundamentally drive security posture at a company. And so I think there's probably 10 or 12 things that all companies should be doing and had better be doing really, really well before they start to consider a lot of other of these esoteric products that are coming on the market. So I won't list them all, but for example, patching, endpoint protection, identity access and governance, vulnerability scanning, security awareness training. Those are 5 of probably 10 or 12 that if you're not doing a great job of, you need to stop doing what you're doing right now and go and address them. And so why is identity and identity governance on that list? And so again, all these security tools, if you go out and look, they're specifically designed to detect and prevent, they're specifically designed to detect and prevent attacks while also not impacting the operation of the business. So when legitimate users are accessing legitimate applications, you have a smooth running business, right? That's the goal. Protect everything around that so that business can operate. However, what if you have legitimate user accounts accessing legitimate applications, but in an inappropriate or unauthorized manner, right? And so security tools try to ensure that all of these things are protected, but they don't and they can't see if the access is truly appropriate at the granular level necessary for a company to truly ensure its security posture and also to feed into compliance. And so only with an identity governance type solution can you really go back and determine those three basic questions that I mentioned before. Who has access to what? Who should have access? And what are they doing with that access? And so things like, you know, access management and security and SSO are absolutely out there, and everybody should have those. But again, going back to my previous point, those kind of protect the doors to the house, and we need to really fundamentally understanding what is going on with the access inside the house. That is the driver of a significant number of security breaches across the last several years, and I think identity is becoming much more of a target for the cyber criminal world, because they've fundamentally come to realize that why do I need to spend all my time trying to breach perimeters and breach applications? If I can take own of an identity, then I get the key to the door of multiple houses, and it's an easy way to get in, and it's an easy way to quietly get in. So identity, I think, is just absolutely part and parcel to kind of those 10 core basics. If you're not doing all of those things, I think you need to stop, take care of those things before you go out and start looking at fancy technologies like threat intelligence platforms and things like that. So, thanks.
Well, speaking of focus, what are your top 3 priorities for this year?
Good question. So, you know, interesting. The first one really falls under SaaS Sprawl, right? So I talked about that, and that's something that's near and dear to our hearts here at SailPoint as well, right? SailPoint's been a high-growth company for many, many years, and we have a fair case of SaaS Sprawl ourselves. And so we've been working hard over the last couple of years to put in a SaaS or a technology acquisition intake process that tries to accomplish a couple of things. One is it tries to seek and ensure that new SaaS applications are aligned with our company goals. We want to make sure that it's aligned with all of the needs of the business, right? We're not just trying to solve a problem in a vacuum. We want to address the needs of all of the interested business units and not one. One of the problems with SaaS is, you know, it may be that the vice president of marketing says, hey, we need a tool to help with our demand gen. And there's a fantastic tool out there. If they just go and buy that themselves, they might not be considering what sales operations or some of the other business units that have similar needs would also like to be able to leverage. And so when you go out and you buy those point solutions, not only is it driving cost, right, is it driving data proliferation, but it's also overlapping and duplicating existing functionality, right? So we try to put in a place in that says, what are our business needs? And then collectively as a company, we put a committee together to go out and research and understand what are the applications that are out there. And then we get a lot more strategic about bringing those on board. Vendor security posture is another thing that you have to look at. Vendor risk management is something that's really, really key and becoming ever more important as we go forward, because what we're effectively doing is we're transferring the risk of taking care of our data and our customers' data to a third party. That can't be taken lightly. And so one of the things that we're doing is we're putting together a strategic roadmap, not only put a process in place on how we in a very agile, quick way determine how to intake SaaS apps, but we're also putting together a strategic roadmap that tells us a little bit more about where we're going over the next 3 to 5 years. The other thing that we're doing is we're advancing our security and risk management capabilities. I talked a lot about this, but we're doing a lot and getting a lot of significant traction with our Board of Directors Cybersecurity Committee. We really fundamentally believe that security needs to be operated and operationalized at the board level. And then the last thing, we're also going after some additional compliance frameworks for our SaaS and cloud-delivered solutions that SailPoint develops. So SailPoint's rolling out an exciting new product offering this year, and we're working to get ISO and SaaS, and SOC 2 compliance for it. The other big thing is we're going to be starting to add FedRAMP compliance to our product suite as well, which will enable that product to be sold and consumed by more federal agencies around the world.
Thanks for the insight. We have another question in. How can I help my boss, the CIO, with their priorities?
That's a good question. I think it'd be great if more and more folks in the IT organization would ask that, right? Because I think there's a lot of dependency on the CIO to be the one to identify the opportunities and the priorities, right? I think the answer is to get everybody involved in the process. Some of the best identifiers of issues, opportunities within the business can come from the lower ranks in the organization and even the frontline workers. And then maybe even more importantly, talk to the other business units across the company and ask them what they need, right? There's too much of a tendency to depend on IT to know everything there is about the business and then identify to the business, here are all the things that we need to go do to accelerate it. And I think that the opposite really needs to happen, and the business needs to be able to have a conversation with IT. That happens at the executive level, certainly, but it can also happen at the lower ranks and even the frontline level. Another thing I'd say is help communicate the IT vision outward. That cannot be communicated enough throughout a company. So CIOs do a lot of presentations at the C-level, and they probably have periodic presentations at like the director level, and sometimes even at the, at a company meeting. But does the average employee really understand IT's vision and where things are going? Our frontline can help with that, and if they don't know themselves, then that's another opportunity. But everybody up and down throughout the chain in an IT organization really should be helping to communicate that IT vision outward, right? So we have kind of the bottoms up, tops down, so that everybody kind of understands. And only that way can we really ensure that it's aligned to the business and identify ways to improve it. Then the last thing I would say is IT needs to learn as much as it can about other areas of the business on a business level, not just technology and tool level. CIOs are being depended on more and more as business leaders, and that's a business statement. It's not a technology statement. And so the more IT and our IT folks understand the business, the better we can help align and enable it. And so I would say those are kind of three things off the top of my head. If my folks are doing all three of those things, they're significantly helping me try to figure out what the priorities are for the year.
Wonderful. Well, that's about all the time we have for today. As a reminder, we'll be sending out a recorded version of the webinar within the next few days, as well as the relevant assets. If at any point you have questions, feel free to reach out to sales@sailpoint.com, and we'll get you in touch with an identity expert. Thank you, Kevin, for your presentation, and thanks, everyone, for tuning in today. Have a wonderful rest of your day.